Just ask that you speak into the microphone, please. Okay, whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Officer Saraf, Saraf, Canton Police Department.
And how long have you been a member of the Canton Police Department?
About 27 years.
Now, were you working with the Canton Police Department on January 28th into January 29th of 2022?
I was.
Did you recall what shift you were working on that occasion?
I was working midnight to 8 shift.
Midnight to 8 a.m., is that correct?
That's correct.
And were you dispatched to a call at approximately 6:05 a.m.?
Yes, I was.
And if you recall, what was the dispatch in regard to and where specifically were you dispatched to?
It was a call of a person that was unconscious outside, I believe it was 34 Fairview Road in Canton.
Now, that particular area of Canton, are you familiar with that area of Canton?
Yes.
And as far as the town of Canton is concerned with respect to police department, is there any sort of different sectors within the town that you would be assigned to patrol?
That's correct.
And the area of Fairview Road, would that be within your sector that you would typically
Yes.
patrol?
That was West Sector.
And how many sectors within the town of Canton are there?
4.
Now, that particular area of Fairview Road, what type of area is that? Is it residential, commercial, or something else?
It's residential.
And the roadway of Fairview Road, there's houses on that roadway, is that correct?
That's correct.
Is there any sort of, it's a paved roadway, is that correct?
It is, yes.
The lanes, are they divided by any sort of lines in the middle of them?
Yes.
And who, if anyone, owns or maintains that particular roadway?
The town of Canton does?
Now, you received that dispatch. Where were you, if you recall, when you received the dispatch?
I was, there's a church right next to the police station. I was in that parking lot.
And with respect to the evening of the 28th into the morning of the 29th, what, if anything, were you aware of as far as sort of forecast of the weather or anything sort of impending coming in?
Yeah, it was snowing pretty good that night. It was a snowstorm that evening.
So there's a snowstorm that had been predicted, is that correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And there was a snowstorm actually occurring around that time, just after 6 a.m.
That's correct.
And at the time that you're responding, a little after 6 a.m., was it light out, dark out, or something?
It was dark out.
And the time, if you know, how much time elapsed sort of between the time that you received the call and the time that you arrived in that area of Fairview Road?
It's pretty close, so a couple of minutes maybe, because I didn't obviously go as fast as you could go because the roads were pretty snowy.
During the course of, you have been working sort of since midnight, correct?
Correct.
And over the course of your work throughout that evening, had you, or what, if anything, had you noticed with regard to snow removal as far as town plows or anything like that?
I don't understand. Were they plowing? Is that your question? They were plowing the roads.
Okay. So there had been some sort of treatment or plowing to the roads prior to your response, as far as you know?
Yes, yes.
What were sort of the road conditions or the visibility or anything like that, if you recall, during your response time?
It was pretty well. The roads were definitely slippery. It took me a while to get to the destination.
And if you recall, sir, what was sort of the path of travel that you took from, you mentioned you were in the church parking lot next to the police station, correct?
That's correct.
And where is the police station located in Canton?
So police station's on Washington Street, 1492 Wash.
And so what was sort of the path of travel that you took from the church lot next to the police station to Fairview?
So I went past the police station onto Chapman Street, and then from Chapman Street I went to Fairview Road.
And when you were approaching Fairview Road, are you taking a right or left or something?
It's a right.
And as you were taking that right onto Fairview, what, if anything, happened with your vehicle as you were taking that turn?
Nothing that I recall.
And that particular, coming from that, the Chapman side of Fairview, Fairview goes from Chapman and then it goes down to sort of, let's say, the bottom of the street. It connects with another street. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what is the street that's
Cedar Crest?
Cedar? And if you're coming from the Chapman side down to the Cedar Crest side, what, if anything, is there as far as an elevation? Like, is it uphill, downhill, or flat?
It's down a hill, fairly decent sized hill.
Now, as you are driving down Fairview, what, if anything, you mentioned it was dark outside, correct?
That's correct.
So what, if anything, beyond sort of the headlights on your cruiser, did you utilize for assistance as you were driving down Fairview?
I had a spotlight on the driver's side, a handheld spotlight to try to locate the house in question.
And if I could just ask you a little bit about the type of vehicle that you were driving. So was it, what kind of police cruiser were you driving on?
It's Explorer.
So SUV, is that right?
Yes, SUV, yes.
And as far as those, or the particular cruiser that you were driving on that occasion, what, if anything, is it equipped with as far as cameras or anything like that within the vehicle?
Yeah, it's equipped with a camera for front and back, and in the rear seat of the cruiser.
And so as you're driving down Fairview, you reach out and start to utilize your spotlight sort of on, where is that located on the cruiser?
It's on my left-hand side.
And is that a spotlight that's outside of the cruiser or inside of the cruiser? Where is it located
On the outside of the cruiser, but there's a handle that manipulates it so you can point the spotlight where you want to go.
Okay, so you have some sort of tool within the cruiser where you can manipulate where it points?
That's correct.
And as you're coming down Fairview, utilizing that spotlight, what, if anything, do you observe out in front?
Well, as I got to my destination, I saw 3 people on the lawn of in the snow, waving at me.
And initially, when you see these 3 people in the snow, do you have any idea sort of who they are, or male, female, anything like that?
There were 3 women, and I later learned there was a male subject on the ground.
And so when you initially are sort of approaching or getting to the residence, you indicate you see the 3 women waving at you. Could you see, or what, if anything, could you see the body at that point?
I saw that there was somebody on the ground. Yes,
so you could see the 3 women, and you could see a person on the ground.
that's correct.
And at some point, subsequent to this, did you learn the identity of the person on the ground?
I did.
And who did you learn that?
John
person?
O'Keefe.
And prior to this dispatch, did you know John O'Keefe in any way?
No.
Now, the 3 females that you saw sort of around Mr. O'Keefe's body on the ground, at some point later, did you subsequently identify who those 3 people were?
I did.
And who did you identify?
One was Karen Read. The other one was Miss McCabe and Miss Roberts, I believe.
All right, sir, I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up, okay, or speak into the microphone.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Now, you arrive on scene, and I'm assuming you get out of your cruiser. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What, if anything, did you do from there?
I walked over to the scene. I first asked, is this person a drug user? He's have an issue with drugs. Somebody said, no, he's a Boston police officer. I said, okay. I checked for a pulse. I couldn't find a pulse. Then I went back to my cruiser and tried to find the AED, which is an automated external defibrillator.
Back to us for a second. So you indicated that you checked for a pulse, correct?
That's correct.
And where on Mr. O'Keefe did you check for?
On his neck, he's carotid.
Sort of his carotid, is that correct?
That's correct.
And when you made contact with sort of the skin area in his carotid area on his neck, what, if anything, did you observe as far as Mr. O'Keefe when you did?
I couldn't find any pulse or anything like that, and he was cold to the touch.
Now, when you did this, Mr. O'Keefe, you mentioned was sort of on the ground, correct?
That's correct.
And how was he sort of positioned on the ground?
He was laying on his back.
And as far as your observations of Mr. O'Keefe during this initial time when you're checking the pulse, what, if anything, did you observe sort of on him or around him or anything like that?
I didn't really.
Let me ask it a different way. So as far as you mentioned that when you arrived there, it was snowing out, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so how much snow was in and around or on top of Mr. O'Keefe when you first observed?
It was about, I would say about 6 inches on the ground. There was a light dusting on top of him, I would say.
And what, if any, observations did you make of Mr. O'Keefe and sort of how he was dressed at this time initially that you observed?
I don't recall what he was wearing.
Now, with reference to the residence at 34 Fairview Road, if you're standing in front of the house on the street facing the house, which side of the property was Mr. O'Keefe lying on his back?
As you're facing the house, it's to the, I'm sorry, go again. Can you say that again, please?
So if you're standing on the street facing the house, was Mr. O'Keefe more to the center of the property, the right of the property, or the left?
He was on the left of the property, yes.
Now, in addition to Mr. O'Keefe, in this sort of area on the left side of the property, what, if any, sort of other landmarks or other things did you observe on that side of the property?
To the left of the property, there was a fire hydrant, a bush, and a flagpole, I believe. To the left, to the farther left, like more near the property line, I would say.
Now, with reference to mention that it was snowing out and there was snow on the ground, correct?
That's correct.
What, if anything else, did you note as far as the weather conditions, as far as wind, temperature, or anything like that?
It was, I would say it was near blizzard conditions. It was snowing really, really hard.
And how cold? Obviously, January, it's snowing out. It was cold, but how cold was it, if you know, when you first arrived?
Less than 32 degrees. I don't know exactly. I mean, it was cold.
So you pull up in that area with the three females. Are they to your right or to your left?
I pulled up. Basically, I had my cruiser straight on.
And
Right.
so which side of the cruiser were the three females and Mr. O'Keefe when you pull up and stop?
Was straight ahead.
Straight ahead.
Well, a little to the left.
Both of them. And what, if any, other vehicles did you observe sort of in the roadway in that area where the three females were and Mr. O'Keefe?
There was another vehicle in the roadway on the side of the road. I parked basically right behind that.
And do you recall anything about that vehicle, like what type it was, what
I
color,
don't.
or anything like that?
I don't recall.
Now, with regard to the three females you identified as Miss Read, Miss McCabe, and Miss Roberts, do you recall where they were in relation to Mr. O'Keefe, each of them, when you first sort of pull up and get out of your cruiser?
So when I arrived, I saw Miss Reed looked like she was giving CPR to him, and she had blood on her face.
Now, in addition to yourself, there are other sort of first responders that are dispatched to the scene as well. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And of them, who, if anyone else, was on scene at the time that you arrived?
When I arrived, I was the first to arrive. Then there was Officer Mullaney that came a few minutes later, and then the fire department came after him, and I believe Sergeant Good came within that. I don't know how many minutes, but it was pretty close.
So you're first to arrive on scene, and then Mullaney comes a couple of minutes later?
Yes.
And about how long was it between when Officer Mullaney arrives and when the fire department arrives?
A couple minutes. I don't.
Then at some point after that, a Sergeant Good comes? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Sergeant Good is a sergeant with your department?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, the fire department, when they arrived, do you recall what type of apparatus they had that arrived on scene?
I believe it was an engine. They usually come with an engine and an ambulance.
So to your recollection, it was at least an ambulance and an engine.
Yeah, yes.
When you were in transit, sort of coming from the church parking lot next to the station to 34 Fairview, what, if anything, did you have activated on your cruiser as far as lights or sirens or anything like that?
I believe I might have my blue lights on. I'm not sure.
As far as the time that you're coming, this is shortly after 6 a.m. in a blizzard, was there, what, if any, sort of other vehicular traffic did you observe en route from church parking lot to 34 Fairview?
There wasn't any that I can recall.
So you go to get your AED device from your cruiser, is that correct?
That's correct.
And around that time that you're retrieving that, what happens?
The FD, the fire department, came on scene, and they took over care of Mr. O'Keefe.
Now, beyond sort of just checking pulse, as far as around that time when you were checking the pulse in the carotid area for Mr. O'Keefe, what, if any, other observations did you make with regard to any injuries or anything else on Mr. O'Keefe?
Well, when I first got there, he had blood on his face and it was just wiped away. So that's the only.
So there was blood on his face that was wiped away?
That's correct.
Now, when the fire department arrives on scene and they sort of take over resuscitative efforts with regard to Mr. O'Keefe, is that correct?
That is correct.
And the person you identified as Ms. Reed, firstly, do you see that person in the courtroom today?
I do.
Could you just identify as to where she's seated or an article of
Seating at the table right there, in black.
County disaster record reflect identification done by the witness?
Yes.
Now, after the fire department arrived and they sort of take over resuscitative efforts with regard to Mr. O'Keefe, what, if any, observations did you make of Ms. Reed and what she was doing or saying at that?
Miss Reed was visibly upset. She kept saying, "This is all my fault. This is my fault. I did this," and she was very hysterical.
And
She kept asking, "He's dead. Is he dead? Is he dead?"
and with that specific phraseology, that's something that she kept saying?
Yes,
And by your repetitive nature, I'm assuming it was said something that she said more than once. Correct?
several times. Correct.
And when she's saying this, can you describe sort of how she's saying this? I mean, is it a whisper? Is it a scream? Or is it something else?
She was yelling pretty good.
And with regard to her repetitive question as far as is he dead, what, if any, response did you provide to her in regard to that?
I just said they're doing the best that they can. I don't know.
Now, at some point, did you direct Ms. Reed, the defendant, to somewhere else away from Mr. O'Keefe?
Yeah, I tried to get her out of the elements. I put her in a car. I don't know if it was my cruiser or another cruiser there, but I had her sit in the back seat just to get out of the snow.
And did she stay in that cruiser for any?
She stayed in for a few minutes and then she was like up and down, up and down.
So sort of in and out of whatever car you put her into.
That's correct.
When she would come out of the car, where would she go?
She was just walking around. From what I remember,
Now, with reference to Mr. O'Keefe, he's laying on his back on the ground. That location, where was that in relation to the roadway of Fairview Road?
I would say about 20 feet off the road.
So if it's 20 feet off of the road, is it fair to say that was on sort of the front lawn of 34 Fairview?
Yes, that's correct.
And at some point, the fire department takes Mr. O'Keefe's body off of the lawn, is that correct?
That is
And where were
correct.
you in relation to Mr. O'Keefe when that happened?
I don't remember.
And from, if you don't remember, do you recall anything about sort of what the ground looked like when Mr. O'Keefe was lifted up?
I don't recall. I didn't.
Now, that area around where Mr. O'Keefe was, um, when you initially come up, you see him on the ground and you check the pulse. What, if anything, did you note around Mr. O'Keefe's body as far as the condition of or disturbance of the snow around?
I noticed that there were footprints and track marks around the body itself. There was none coming from the residence or the area. It was just right around the body itself.
And so the position that Mr. O'Keefe is lying on his back on the lawn, correct?
Correct.
Is his head closer to the house or the street or something else?
I believe his head was closest to the house.
And the footprints that you're talking about, was that between sort of his feet in the street or above his head, or where was it in relation to
Basically all around him because people were walking around him.
And as far as beyond sort of the immediate area above his head, between his head and the house, what if any footprints or what if any disturbance in the snow did you observe up there?
I didn't see any.
Now, Officer Saraf, about how long was it that you were on scene there?
I want to say about an hour and a half.
And at some point, the fire department transports Mr. O'Keefe from the scene. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And do you know to what facility he was transported to?
I don't recall where they went.
And after Mr. O'Keefe was taken away by the fire department, as far as the three females, Miss Reed, Miss McCabe, and Miss Roberts, do you know where they went or what they did following that?
They, after talking to Sergeant Good, they left in their car. I don't know where they went. The car that was there, they left.
Now, at any point in the time that you were on scene before they left, did you have any conversation with any of the three of them?
I asked, where were they? What happened? And what were they doing?
And who specifically
I-
did you talk to, if you recall?
Well, I asked Miss Reed, and she couldn't really tell me too much about what happened. Miss McCabe said that they were drinking in a couple bars downtown.
Let me just stop
Okay.
you before, as far as, so just sticking with Miss Reed.
Yep.
You asked her what happened and you indicated she didn't really tell you. What,
No,
Why not? What was her condition like at that point?
she was very upset.
So the same upset that you were describing earlier, did that sort of continue throughout the time that she was on scene while you were there?
I would say yes.
And at some point, did you speak to Miss McCabe without reference to what she told you?
I'm sorry.
At some point while you're on scene, did you speak to either Miss McCabe or Miss Roberts without reference to what they told you?
No, I mean,
Let me rephrase.
rephrase. Yeah.
At some point when you're on scene, did you have occasion to have a conversation with Miss McCabe?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point when you were on scene, did you have occasion to have a conversation with Miss Roberts?
I didn't speak with Miss Roberts. I don't believe.
Was there someone else from your department that was speaking with Miss Roberts on scene? You know.
I believe Sergeant Good or Officer Mulaney was.
The other two officers that were there.
Correct.
Now, following Sergeant Good's arrival, who, if anyone else from your department, arrived on scene at some point?
Detective Lank, Detective Sergeant Lank, and Lieutenant Gallagher.
And if you know, when was their arrival in relation to sort of when you arrived?
It was light out, so I want to say maybe 7 o'clock ish.
And so for the period that you were on scene, you said it was about an hour and a half. Is that correct?
That's about right.
The weather conditions that you described sort of when you first arrived, what, if any, change occurred in the weather conditions from the time that you arrived and the time that you left?
The conditions lightened up a little bit. I mean, it was still snowing, but
Still snowing, still cold, correct?
yes, correct.
The wind, was that still persistent as well?
I would say yes.
Now, at some point after Ms. Reed, the defendant left the scene, did she come back?
She did.
And do you know how long a period it was that she was gone between when she left and when she came back?
Just a few minutes.
And do you know why she came back?
I don't know.
And when she returned to the scene, who, if anyone, did you speak with her further at that point?
No,
Who, if anyone, did you observe her to be speaking with?
I don't recall.
Now, the initial ambulance that showed up took and transported Mr. O'Keefe, is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, after that ambulance left and Ms. Reed came back to the scene, what, if any, other apparatus from the fire department arrived on scene at that point?
Another ambulance came.
And who, if anyone, went in that ambulance for transport?
They took Miss Reed to the hospital.
And do you know what hospital that she went to?
I don't recall.
Yes.
And, Your Honor, if I may request the lights be dim.
Okay, could we dim them, please?
Ms. Gilman, if I could have exhibit number 8 up on the screen. Thank you very much. Now, Officer Saraf, do you recognize what's depicted up on the screen as exhibit number 8?
Yes,
And what do you recognize as?
it's the house 34 Fairview.
And that's the house that you responded to on that date, is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
And what's contained in that photograph, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed roughly when you arrived on that date?
Yes.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Direct your attention to this. This is just a laser point.
Yep.
I'm trying not to point it in anybody's eyes, but basically, this button here, if you just click on that, that will shine wherever you want. Okay. So from this photograph in exhibit number 8, sir, where Mr. O'Keefe's body was when you first arrived, is that visible in this photograph or no?
I would say it would be over more to the left.
Okay, so further off to the left, is that correct?
That's correct.
Before we get to that, just briefly, Ms. Gilman, if I could have exhibit number 13. You could please enlarge, thank you. Now, Officer Saraf, do you recognize what's contained in this exhibit number 13?
It's a street.
That's, fair enough. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Sorry. Let's see.
So what I placed before you as exhibit 13, is that it's up on the screen?
Yes, this is
Okay. And is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what Fairview Road looked like around the time that you were dispatched and arrived on scene?
yes.
Absent the lighting condition, you mentioned it was dark when you arrived, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so this is sometime after when the sun has come up.
Correct.
If I could ask you to flip to the next exhibit number 14, if I could have that one. And again, officer, what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you as Exhibit 14?
Yes,
And you were testifying earlier about sort of footprints in and around where Mr. O'Keefe was. Is that correct?
that is correct.
And what's depicted on the screen in exhibit number 14, is that fair and accurate portrayal of the footprints that you were talking?
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Ron?
Yes.
So now I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibit 18. Thank you, Ms. Gilman. If you could enlarge that just a little bit. Thank you so much. Now, from this photograph, well, first and foremost, do you recognize what's depicted up in exhibit 18 on the screen here?
Yes,
And this is 34 Fairview Road, correct?
that is correct.
And in regard to, you had mentioned some sort of landmarks off to the left side of the property, facing the property from the street, correct?
Yes.
And if you could, using that laser pointer that I placed up there before you, if you could direct the jury's attention to first those landmarks that you observed. I'm sorry, officer, if you could, while you're
Oh,
directing,
sorry.
if you could just describe what you're.
So there's the flagpole right there. There's a bush there, and right there, I believe, is the fire hydrant.
And so where in relation to this photograph, if you can see it here, was Mr. O'Keefe's body when you first saw it?
It's right in this area right here.
Now, if I could turn back just a moment, when you indicated that you were coming up to the scene and you could see the three females sort of waving and Mr. O'Keefe on the ground, correct?
That is correct.
Well, how far away were you from them when you first observed them or first saw them?
About 20 feet or so.
And when you are driving down Fairview, if you could describe to the jury, where is your direction? Sort of, where are you direct? As far as you're driving a vehicle, are you looking straight in front of you, or are you looking out the window, a combination of both, or?
I was looking for the house numbers, trying to find the house where it was, and there was, I saw the motor vehicle parked on the side of the road.
And that sort of leads to my next question, sir. So what did you see first? Did you see the vehicle parked in front of you, or did you see the people off to the side?
I saw the vehicle.
May I approach this to retrieve your?
Yes.
Do you want this?
So, Officer Saraf, you had testified earlier in regard to a camera within your cruiser, correct?
That's correct.
And subsequent to that day, have you seen the video of your arrival to the scene from the cruiser camera perspective?
I saw it once.
Okay. And, Your Honor, I would seek to introduce and admit as the next exhibit the cruiser camera stream 1 from cruiser 683.
Or is there an objection? Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I could reach across. I'm sorry for the back and forth, Mr. Officer, but if I could ask the lights again. Ms. Gilman, if you could play what's now been marked as Exhibit 25. And if you could just pause it right there, Ms. Gilman. So, Officer Saraf, what's up on the screen? Is that what you recall as far as the sort of visibility and the roadway conditions when you first left the church parking lot?
Yes.
And this is you sort of leaving from the church parking lot as you're going to 34th Fair, correct?
Yes.
Now, there are a number of different sort of things up on this screen. There's an indication as far as the speed that the vehicle is going at, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and where is that located, if you could, with the laser pointer there?
Sweet. Whoops, sorry.
Now, along sort of the bottom of that particular video, there's an indication as far as mic, brakes, lights, siren, correct?
Correct.
If those are activated, is there any sort of change in sort of the depiction there? Does it change sort of color or anything like that that you're aware of?
I don't know.
Okay. And the 683 on the bottom right corner, is that the cruiser that you were in that day?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, as far as sort of the top middle of this video, there's a date and a time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
As far as you're aware, that date and time that's up there, that's accurate to when this occurred, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so we're sort of looking in real time, correct?
correct.
So, Ms. Gilman, if you could just let it run from this point. Ms. Gilman, I'm sorry, if you could stop with this brief. So, Officer Saraf, this road you're traversing at this point, this is Washington Street, is that correct?
That is correct.
And at some point, you're going to then travel through and then take a right onto Fairview, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, if you could, just for the jury's sake, as you approach Fairview and as you're taking that right turn, just direct their attention to the fact that that's when you're turning onto Fairview.
Sure.
Ms. Gilman, you can go ahead and continue.
So this right here is Chapman Street. This right here is Fairview.
Ms. Gilman, if you could just pause it there for 1 second. So, Officer, similar to as the turn onto Fairview, at some point, if you observe the point at which you believe you sort of illuminated your spotlight on the side of the cruiser, if you could just speak up and draw the jury's attention to that as well.
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if you could continue.
Right about now, I believe I put the spotlight on.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry, Ms. Gilman, if you could just sort of run it from this point to about the 4-minute mark or so, and then I'd ask you to tell us.
right there.
Plotted right there. Okay. Now, Officer Saraf, this is, you were testifying earlier as far as the vehicle in front of you that you observed first, and then sort of the parties off to your left as far as the three females waving and Mr. O'Keefe on the ground, correct?
That is correct.
And if you could, just using that laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to number one, where the vehicle is that you observed in front of you, and then number two, where you observed the three females and Mr. O'Keefe on the ground.
So here's the vehicle right there, and the females are right there.
Thank you, sir. Now, Ms. Kilman, if you wouldn't mind just running this straight through until about 7.5 minutes. Just one moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Officer, you can turn the. Yes. I have no further questions to this witness, Your Honor.
All right. Will there be a cross-exam? Because this may be a good time to stop if there is.
There will be a cross-examination.
Okay, so jurors, we're going to stop for the day. I have to caution you, those same 3 cautions. Please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into this case. If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about this case, please disregard it and let us know. And just to remind you, tomorrow will be a half day. We'll go from 9 o'clock until 1 o'clock with a mid-morning break. So thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow.
All eyes, please. Jurors, close your notebooks and leave them on your chairs. First row, follow me, please.
All right, could I see counsel at sidebar for a moment, please?